In 1504, Michelangelo completed his masterpiece David in just 2 years. The sculpture is considered a work of perfection of male beauty and form. Over 1 million people from around the globe line up each year to catch a glimpse of this heroic youth. Michelangelo's work has been reproduced into products of every shape and size, some more practical than others. 2 years ago, I began a photo series documenting aging gay and bisexual men. One of my subjects presented me with a pair of alluring briefs he'd purchased on a trip to Italy, featuring a curious silkscreen of David's iconic anatomy. I decided to ask all of the subjects to try on the briefs. That decision took the photo project into a whole new direction. The subjects became more playful, transfigured, and heroic. I wanted to know more about David, the story, and the work of art. So I began a quest. I spoke to religious leaders, art historians, and friends who I thought might offer insight into why David resonates. I began with my mentor in photography and authority on the male form, Arthur Tress.
We kind of improvised a scene where I was a pool boy, and the gesture of removing leaves from the pool was sort of a graceful gesture, reminiscent of the Michelangelo's statue, who's kind of twisted in Italian sculpture that's called contrapposto.
Although it is considered a work of perfection and of ideal beauty, the right hand is, in fact, disproportionately large. It's referred to as manu fortis, or strong of hand. This was done to emphasize the heroic nature of David, this Herculean nude David. Something else that holds up in looking to the genitalia is the scrotal asymmetry. Is another feature that's interesting and rather a constant in not only Renaissance statuary, but also ancient figure, that typically the right testicle is shown higher than the left. The reason being, it is thought, is that because the male child were perceived to be released from the right testicle, whereas females from the left. I also found a very interesting reference called Fate of the Foreskin. Not only was it Michelangelo, but also Donatello made a decision to not portray their figures of David as circumcised males. It seems like an interesting choice not to show their Jewish faith.
Thinking of the many ways I'd like to begin the story. We don't really know that David existed. We know it through the story. We don't have extrinsic archaeological evidence to speak of, but probably did exist, and he was an early king of Israel. He was the second king after Saul. And he's very beautiful. That's the first thing that the Bible says about him, is about his looks.
I'm curious if you know much about the story of David and Goliath.
I know it was about David taking a slingshot and shooting down this giant, menace.
So they both nominated somebody from each sides of their armies. And Goliath was this person who had never lost anything. This gigantic brute, maybe 7 feet tall, I don't know, maybe 8 feet, who knows. So Goliath came down and was like getting ready for like this. He's gonna do like some fucking WWF shit. And David was like, what, bitch? And it ended all in one shot. This is the extent of my knowledge of this.
This young boy came and unexpectedly killed the giant Goliath and liberated the Jewish people.
So Goliath is the great champion of the Philistines. There's an ongoing border skirmish between the Israelites and the Philistines. And Goliath is described as being like 7 feet tall. There's description of his helmet and his armor and his spear and how heavy those things were. And he taunts the Israelites all by himself. When David hears Goliath's taunts, he's moved to shout out, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? You know, if I had a nickel for every time I've had to say that.
Would you be rich?
I'd have 25 cents. It's funny, the physical description of strength is all on Goliath's side in the story, whereas David is not described in those terms at all. David's beauty is all sort of, a facial beauty. What's interesting about how David bests him is that it doesn't rely on strength of arms. When David is moved to be the champion to fight Goliath, King Saul gives him armor, but David takes the armor off, and he collects 4 stones, and he goes in with just his slingshot. And this is how David becomes kind of the symbol of the underdog in a certain way in the culture, right? Is that he's not as powerful as Goliath, and he doesn't pretend to be, but he's deliberate and precise. And he takes a stone in his slingshot, and he hits Goliath in the forehead.
Typically in the Renaissance, 2 different moments are depicted in the narrative. One is the fight, between David and Goliath. The second is the moment after the fight. The moment that Michelangelo selected was before the fight.
I learned that throughout art history, David was almost always portrayed with Goliath's severed head in his hands. But that's not the path Michelangelo took. His depiction of David just before going to battle was contemplative and pensive, and it changed and informed the way I photographed my subjects. Everyone has had a battle, internal or external, that they've had to overcome, even when the odds were against them. Coming to terms with my own sexuality in my 40s was extremely challenging. I wanted to hear how others faced their Goliaths, knowing that in many cases they would be rejected or shamed by their families, religious communities, or even government. So like Michelangelo's David, I chose the moments before getting ready for work, before entering the ocean, or the moment just before jumping off a ledge.
When I joined the military, I knew I had an attraction to same-sex. And I'm going out to war, and they're telling me that the person who showed me my true worth, don't ask, don't tell. So 11 years I served, and I was in a position where if someone was caught in the barracks with the same sex, you would have a review board, basically. And that board would most likely put you out. And on that board are your superiors. So I was in the position of being on a board, and I could not see myself sitting there ending someone's career. So I thought, I have to get out. And everyone was like, wow, 11 years, that's almost, you could have just retired. And I thought, no, because it's not worth my integrity. I live my life with integrity, with pride, and with like a sense of mindfulness and challenging things that I feel are wrong.
You have been awful quiet tonight. Really, I mean, here we've been opening our hearts and sharing our demons with all of our friends here. And what about you?
I always wanted to be a rabbi, so this was always somewhere hovering at the horizon. And, at the beginning, when I would naturally have done it, there were no seminaries that were accepting openly gay candidates, so I didn't do it. And in retrospect, I'm glad I didn't do it. I feel like I have so much more to offer after having taken this really wild journey through, law and through AIDS activism and HIV work and queer activism and comedy and performance and drag. I feel like I've got such an odd bundle of experiences and insights. And now bringing to that also rabbinic learning is thrilling, and finding the ways to present my point of view and to bring it into the center in Judaism. A lot of us think that religion demands us to be somehow, well-behaved, and that involves these lists of behaviors and never doing these kinds of behaviors, and that's how you're close to God. And I think the David story tells us that it's not about that.
Good. Yeah, and hold it there. Look out that way, exactly like you are.
I'm from Mississippi, so I'm a Southern Baptist church. My great-grandfather was a preacher, so I was in church a lot. And when I came out to my mother, I told her on the phone I was gay. She didn't be like, Mom, why don't you come over to my house and meet my ex-partner? So she came over, and when she walked in, I introduced my ex-partner, who was white. And she just looked at me, and she's like, oh. And then my stepdad and my grandmother came. There was nothing to say. We just ate and just talked. And when they left, I got a text message. I need to sit and think about this. So a year went past. We didn't talk. Nobody talks to me. Even my 2 kids don't talk to me. My kids are 25 and 26.
And they don't talk to you because you're gay?
Mm-hmm.
They're missing out.
I say that all the time, so it's okay. Hey, you know what? I ain't gotta be who I am.
I didn't know I was transgendered until I started talking about my gender neutrality. But I've only recently started saying I no longer want she pronouns. And I don't know why I put that with a high pitch, she pronouns, because should I not, But no, it's just, I only recently just felt like most of my life, 98% of it, when I walk out in the world reflects back he. So I started telling my friends that I'm no longer she. I'm Skylar, he, they, them, there, but not she. And I feel more congruent with where I'm at in my life because trans is a journey. You arrive to it. And we all arrive at our own time.
I think sort of the childhood experience of being a queer kid and being bullied is something that's common to a lot of gay men. And I think a lot of us had to do a lot of fancy footwork to dodge our oppressors. And David does that with Goliath, and he does it with Saul also. And he ends up coming into a certain kind of power as a result of surviving all of this and finding his ways of overcoming the bully. And I think that's something, there's a certain queer element to that story.
In Napoli, where love is king, where boy meets girl, here's what they say.
Hashtag what's your Goliath? Oh, I love that.
You do?
Yeah, I do love that. I do love that. Yeah, what's the thing that's bullying you and taunting you that you finally need to just stand up and say, get me my river stones? Yeah, I love that.
With a glad at your feet, you're in love. When you walk in a dream, but you know you're not dreaming, signore. Excuse me, but you see, back in old Napoli, that's amore. When the stars make you drool just like a pasta fazool, that's amore. When you dance down the street with a glad in your feet, you're in love. When you walk in a dream, but you know you're not dreaming, signore.